I want to just say that wisdom comes forth out of humor and joviality, friendship, just as surely as it comes forth out of staidness and sanctimoniousness in churchdom. And I think that much more comes forth out of laughter than any other way. I don't believe that any of you have ever known anyone on this earth who, as the world would say, was enlightened, who was not monumentally, had a grand sense of humor and used it. Humor teaches what many things don't. You know, the Maharishi came over here, and he was criticized by one aspect of southern churchdom down there, who criticized this terrible heathen who came over here, and speaking of who didn't embrace Christianity, and because he giggled all the time. They said, how can anybody who giggles and is so happy and so jolly, how can anybody like that teach anybody anything? Just by way of a story, I might tell you that I, at one time, studied with a man who just was the height of fun all the time. As a matter of fact, when I first met him, well, let me tell you this. He stood out in a crowd, and he was to be my interpreter. This was when I was first in China during World War II, and I was a lieutenant over there then, and I was among the first infantry soldiers to go into China. We were to go out and be with the Chinese troops. And so I was to have an interpreter. And this one man, he was in this group of interpreters, and he just stood out to me like he was much older than the rest. But here was this man who, with a big smile on his face, and there was an aura and an atmosphere about him, and everyone was listening to him, and he was slapping his knees, and he looked like the typical pot-bellied Buddha with a big smile. I saw one today, the first laughing Buddha that I've ever seen. Someone had been sent a gift of a little carved jade one. Lynn, you should see that. Have you seen it? Dion has seen it. And but anyway, here was this little fella, and he was laughing to beat 60 all the time. So to make a long story short, I got him as my interpreter. This man was later to be a teacher with whom I studied to study Oriental philosophy and Oriental ideas with. But just 2 or 3 weeks before, he had lost his wife, who had been raped to death before his eyes by the intruding Japanese invaders in Hong Kong, and his daughter likewise. But he was not certain that she was dead. And all of this had been a part of his experience just 3 weeks or so before. And yet here was this man with a monumental sense of equanimity and poise and joviality and calm. And at first I didn't know whether this was a horrible Oriental callousness, because, you know, we've all heard that the Oriental applauds at death and cries at birth. But I found out that it wasn't that at all, that this man had discovered something that allowed for equanimity and tranquility in the face of the horrors of war. I resolved at this time to study this man. Well, this man had a great sense of humor, tremendous. I might tell you another story just along this same line of the Oriental humor. At this time I was a grand judge of everything that took place, because we make our intellectual pursuits, and we get very proud of what we know and don't know about truth, reality, and we become extremely proud of our metaphysical knowledge and our upbringing and our education and what our personal studies and our personal accomplishments and abilities, and we get pretty cotton-picking pleased with it, proud of it. And this, of course, is the intellect of us that weighs and measures every new remark to compare it with all the old ideas to see how it fits in. Well, here I was in China, and one thing that was bugging me considerably was the fact that the Chinese, when they're having food at the table, will periodically let go with a tremendous belch at the table. Well, in this society, we frown a little bit on this. And also, they will occasionally lean over and blow their nose on the floor, right at the dinner table. And then they'll reach down, usually it's a dirt floor, and so they'll cover it over. Well, when this happened, I finally just said to this gentleman, I said, now, you know, in our society, we look down our nose at such as that. We consider that unsanitary. Well, first he said, why? And I said, well, if nothing more, it's unsanitary. And so he sits there with a big grin on his face and his eyes dancing, and not the least bit offended. I think maybe he leaned over and did it again. But in any event, he waited a minute and he said to me, he said, you say it's not sanitary. And he said to me, which do you consider the most unsanitary? To remove the mucus from the nose and cover it over with the earth, or to blow it into a little small square of cloth and stick it back in your pocket and carry it around with you. Well, this is sort of the humor that is the Oriental humor that always has a point behind it. And those of you who have honored me by just listening to these ideas, and I'm not trying to teach anybody anything, but you'll find that there's always a point behind this humor. All of us who live this principle find ourselves teaching it, and I can tell you that every one of you who live this truth will find yourself teaching it. Because as you live it, you take on a glow and a shine, and your affairs straighten up and go right, and miraculous things begin to take place in your experience, and phobias and inhibitions fall away. Youth and enthusiasm and zest return, usually with a grand sense of humor, and people see it and wonder about it and ask. And those are the ones that your Father has given you. When it says, when Jesus said in the Bible, he said, all these things that I do shall ye do also, and this was in the middle of a ministry. He said a truth that was very true, because all of these things will you do too, as you live this truth. You will find yourself skipping where other people are crawling, and you will find yourself walking a straight and narrow course where other people are lost in mazes of one sort and going in circles. And you don't think for a minute that you won't be asked what's cooking and what's going on in your experience, and people that just want to come and be there. And you will know why they're there, and you will then be faithful. And do you know what? You don't have to teach anybody out there anything. All you have to do is tell your own story, what you have come to perceive. And this way, it doesn't make any difference whether anybody out there believes it or not. You've done and discharged your responsibility. And let's talk about people just a minute. First of all, we perceive that God is alone, total and all. Well, then what are people? What are these images that we see? This winds up being the ultimate test of metaphysics. I don't know of any clear and definitive explanation yet that has been presented that says it really like it is. We have been told that people are images of God. And this has us going around all the time saying, I'm an image. Never was this so. But what are people that we see? What are these people? Why do we see a great multiplicity of people? Why do we see it? Well, what is this right here, right now, that is being conscious, that we call life? This awareness. This awareness. This that listens to Bill up here, this that feels a chair underneath you, or feels your feet folded underneath, or sees a sunset, or feels love, that is what awareness is, simple awareness. Certainly a doctor would not disagree about this, or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Awareness and life are synonymous terms. But now there is much, much more to awareness than just this bit of sensing and perceiving. But let's just for a minute, just right here, this awareness that is perceiving, right here, this is what life is. Now, who and what are we? Are we the body, this body? Is this the identity? When you stand and look in a mirror, that thing that you see there that goes by the name of Betty, or Bill, or Lynn, or something else, is that who and what you are? Is that identity? Well, the kids know cotton picking well it isn't. One of the grand Mid-Eastern philosophy said to know thyself and what it is. Well, if it was a body that wakes up in the morning, you got to brush its teeth and you got to comb its hair and you all that kind. If that's identity, it isn't very hard to determine all that, you know. But what is identity? Well, let's consider just a minute. Right here, awareness is aware, isn't it? Awareness right now perceives a room full of lovely people. It's hearing sounds that it may like or dislike. But awareness is being aware right here, right now. And this awareness that's being aware, it looks down and sees a body within it that it calls Bill or Mary or Jane. And the game we play as a human, as humanity, we say this is me, and I am this, and awareness or consciousness that includes the view of the body that right now is listening, we say that awareness is mine. And then we are the me who says mine in this world. That says my life, my view of things, my opinion, my education, my body, my love, my dollars, my this and my that. But all the while, it doesn't alter the fact that awareness, or consciousness itself, is who and what we are. That includes the body within it. Never has awareness been encased and limited to a body. And the sundry things that are going on in the world, this business of an expanded awareness, this business of projection, teleportation, telekinesis, all of this are, in one way or another, proofs that awareness cannot be confined to the most limited human here and now concept of a body. So what you see in the mirror, you can say is yours, it belongs to awareness. But so does every other body. There's no separation. That is, they are all perceived in one place. Now, when we assume the identity as awareness itself, we suddenly see that we are not separate and apart from people. That people are included within and as the very identity we are. If we paste one of those people out there in the mouth, humanly speaking, you've pasted somebody in the mouth and you may feel pretty good about it, but what you have really done is you've looked at an aspect of yourself and nailed yourself. If you're spiteful and ugly to one out there, despise or hate one out there, you are in effect looking at one aspect of this awareness you are, one of your own infinite qualities, characteristics, and attributes, and have tried to do it in. By the same token, if you would do such a thing, then you are believing that one of those images within awareness is capable of doing you in. That they can be ugly, they can cheat, steal, lie, and so forth, and that is, and hurt you, and in one way or another destroy your own equanimity. But when we perceive that awareness is who and what we are, the identity, and incidentally, you might, if you'll look and see, you will see that the basis for every new philosophic, not new, but every philosophic concept that has come along has been that there is a coming home to the genuine identity, the real identity. And it's a turnaround. It's a completely different thing. It lets all the preconceived ideas and notions go. In Christianity it says, you don't put new wine into old wineskins, or we become again as children. We let go all the former concepts. In the East, it is said in one place, I was just talking about that today, that your propeller begins to spin in the other direction. By whatever the terminology, and I think I'm convinced that you at least have some small amounts of wood that burn. And not only burn, but get hot. So I'm going to move over in the corner.
wondering how long it would take.
I'm going to relegate this image Bill, see, to his proper place, back in a corner. Now listen, once you have identified as awareness itself, you see then that all images are just images being images, and none have more nor less importance than any other. The real importance is the awareness that perceives images. Isn't this so? So all of a sudden you don't see people as anymore as somebody that you have to bow down to or bow and scrape before or be fearful of. Rather you see that, well, okay, they can play any kind of game they like, but I know that I am looking at an aspect of myself. And we suddenly find that, to use our analogy that we were using a little while ago about the principle of arithmetic, where heretofore we had identified as just one number that climbed up on the mountain number 7, you remember, and stuck its feet over the edge and looked down in the valley. We had identified as a number. You will see that the new identification is to identify as the principle itself. The principle that's being the number. So there is another identity that's present right here, right now. And that new identity is pure, perfect, pristine, without beginning and end, guiltless, flawless, infinite, eternal awareness. This is who and what we are. And incidentally, this awareness itself is unending. The body can fall apart, it can get shot full of holes, a roof can fall in, it can slide in the ocean. You'll find awareness goes right on being aware. And awareness is who and what we are, not a body. Now, awareness continues to be embodied, that is, appear to perceive and look out from a point, as well as perceive universally. And I won't go into this in any detail because this, I suppose, would be what somebody would want to say really gets involved or deep, but a mathematician will tell you that the only way that a form can be perceived and measured accurately and honestly is from a point. And so this is why there appears to be a point. This experience at the moment, certainly for all of us, has been a continuing and grand concern for what we call the measurable qualities and attributes of existence. We are forever looking at measurable, weighable dimension, form, shape, color, and so forth. And it can be perceived accurately and honestly only from a point. Now, awareness, being infinite, knows all there is to know about its qualities and attributes. It perceives from a point, as surely as it perceives universally, not from a point. Okay, that's... I don't want to go into... I'm just listening to and hearing some of your thoughts and questions. And I'm rather just running at random with that. I think that right now would be a great time to stop that, and now all you people, just anybody, wherever you like, in any area, ask some questions. Present some ideas to me, or ask what you would like to ask, and let me, insofar as I can, explain them within the boundaries of what we call the allness of God, wherein there is nothing imperfect, wherein there is nothing that worketh or maketh a lie, wherein there is nobody having to arrive at a grand education to get smart, because only the belief of an ego can be educated. And of course we go ahead and go on through such a process as that, because it's very important. The ego plays that is, the intellect plays its role. It has a reason and a significance, but the genuine identity, the only identity that's present here now as awareness itself, is already infinitely wise. Has never been guilty of a sinful act. I'm saying things that hopefully will trigger a question somewhere along the line, because it's pretty hard for the intellect to buy these statements. That there is no guilt, there is no death, there is really no beginning or ending. No questions yet? You are incapable of sin, sickness, disease, or death. Still no? Anybody want to question these remarks? Okay, I'll be quiet a minute, and somebody's bound to come up with something. Because I should be angering some aspect of the nature.
There was something that you said a little earlier about the awareness of a personality trait in another person. In other words, when we are aware of that trait, it is within ourselves.
Yes, yes.
Well, I mean, this is the way I understood it, is that if we are aware of love or hate or any emotion or something in another one, that we must have experienced it or we wouldn't have recognized it for what it was.
Right.
But it's our reaction
All right,
to the awareness of that which would show our involvement, wouldn't it?
Yes. Let's put it this way. Let me make an analogy here relative to the qualities, characteristics, and attributes of people, because we look out and we see people who appear to act ugly. We see tall people, short people, skinny people, fat people, people with one leg or 2 legs, or we might even somewhere find one with 3 legs, but for all I know. But so we see this whole infinite variety of things, right? Well, now, and what are people? And I was trying, maybe I didn't answer this. People are the tangible appearing of infinite awareness. How else can infinite awareness appear except as an infinity or an awful lot of embodied forms out there? How can it appear tangibly? So therefore we look out and see what appears to be a grand infinity of people. And furthermore, we see awareness, aware as microbes. We see awareness aware under the sea. We see awareness aware in the bushes and on the leaves, and it will be found in the universe. And in the spaces between the heavenly bodies will be found life, because life is everywhere alive. Awareness is everywhere aware. There is no place that life is not living. Life is mind, or consciousness, and this is what God is. Can you conceive of a place where there is no principle of arithmetic? Well, if you can see where there is no principle of arithmetic, if you can say that this is true for the principle like arithmetic, why, my goodness, should we not say this is true for that isness that's being the universe? Therefore, God must be everywhere. God is everywhere, or isness is everywhere. And isness is everywhere aware. So life will appear everywhere. Now, therefore, what we call people is the tangible appearing of infinite awareness. Now, there is much more than the tangible appearing. As anyone who has experienced any light, love, inspiration, any grand feeling, compassion, any of those emotions, we know that there is much more to awareness than just a tangible image. For example, you can look at a tangible sunset that I suppose is measurable in one way or another, and feel many things. You can look at the face of a child and see grand beauty and love, and feel all kinds of compassion, and feel all sorts of things that are much more than that image. So therefore there is much more than just that image itself. Well, now, let me ask you this. Awareness is just about the business of perceiving. This awareness that's aware right here, right now, is just perceiving a room full of people. Is awareness looking at these people and calling them right or wrong, dumb or smart, ignorant or unenlightened, or murdering King's English, like me, or what? Who is making this determination? Is awareness doing this? Awareness is not doing that. Awareness is just about the business of, like Jesus said, be the faithful witness. Perceive. See. Awareness is just being aware. Who is making the determination that I don't like something? That something is bad? Who and what is that one? That one is the grand ego that we play at being when we believe that we are the custodian of life, that we are the recipient of life, that God has given life to me, and then that me looks out and says, I like it and I don't like it. I hate it. I want to kill it. I despise it, or I need it, or I value it, or something else. So let's right now, we come home to what? Come back always to the beginning, which is awareness, being aware right here. Isness is this awareness. That deific isness, yes, please.
What about an actual criminal act or something like that on your...
Is there any criminal act going on right here, right now? Besides me up here talking, huh? That's pretty criminal, I'll admit. But you mean if you were to see a criminal act, would you call it good or bad?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, okay, now hang on just a minute. How much good have you ever seen come from criminal acts? The event that is seen out there, it really is not as it appears. I don't know how else to say it, but the one that would look at this act, the one that would see such an act, the one that would condemn it, the one that would be experiencing such an act, would never be awareness itself. It would be the grand custodian or the possessor of it, or the role that we play. This is the reason why when we come home to be simple, credulous awareness and really put it to the test, don't take my word for it, just be it, try it, you will find that your perception of bad events, what things that had appeared heretofore bad or criminal or they fall away. They're not perceived, they're not seen. They are no longer part of your experience. Or if they are seen and perceived, they are seen for what they really are, and you see where with your eyes wide open, and while society or convention or churchdom or somebody else says that this is sinful or not sinful or good or bad. But now I believe I can clarify this if we'll come back to the point I was making. Let's come home to this awareness that's aware right here, right? Judgment. Awareness, only the custodian, the prime role of this ego that we play is to look out at things and give them values that they don't have. Just values that the custodian values. He calls something good and he calls something evil. And herein then lies the beginning of our trials and tribulations. I might point out that Christianity makes this point clear in a metaphorical way when Moses speaks of the creation. He tells of a very perfect, harmonious universe within which there was only peace and perfection, and he called it Eden. Now he said, now in the midst of this garden there is a tree of life, awareness. And he said, but of the fruits thereof thou shalt not eat. And the day thou eatest thereof, you'll surely die. And what was the fruit? What was this tree of knowledge? The intellect and so forth. What was it? The knowledge of what? Of good and evil. So in his allegory, he points out that our trials and tribulations began when we start attaching values of good and evil to the sights and sounds that we see. This is like the principle of arithmetic, looking out at numerals and calling some of them good and some of them bad. They are just numerals being numerals, none good or bad. Now this doesn't mean that some are not one shaped and some another, and some one color and some another, but it means that to call them good or bad is the introduction, because the minute we love something, these are the things that we wish to acquire, and we set all of our machinery in motion to get, and lust develops and desire, and we are miserable if we can't acquire it and get it. And by the same token, when we look at some image that's just being an image and say we don't like it, can't stand that, then every time we see that, we feel some sense of revulsion. We want to change it. We want to get out and alter the world. We want to kill it, make war against it, when all the while we never really had to make such a determination. I have a question over there.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the Kabbalion, which is Hermetic philosophy, before the Egyptians, they had this principle of polarity, which is good and evil. Who is to say what is good and evil? How do you know what is evil unless you know what is good? And how do you know what is hot unless you know what is cold?
Yes, yes.
So who's to say what's good and evil?
Yes, there was in Rome at one time, there was an entire philosophic system based on ending this business of calling things good or bad. I tell you that when we end judgment, and you'll find this outlined, Betty, in great detail in the book, because that's almost the heart and soul of this book. This helps metaphysicians more than any other single concept, because in metaphysics and most of the philosophies, this point is seldom presented, because the ego lives. This is ego food. It is all that maintains the integrity of the misidentification, is its constant battle with its good and evil. As a matter of fact, all organized churchdom exists because it says there is an evil to be overcome and destroyed. Well, who is this one that would ever make this determination? It inevitably is the game that we play when we don't have to do it. And for a grand measure of immediate peace, just start seeing images as images. I'll tell this story now. Many of you have read it, and you'll see it in the book, but I'll tell the story because it means it. There was a time in my experience during the Korean War when I was over there this time I was a company commander, and I had an infantry rifle company up on a mountain. And it was very high, and if I don't tell the story exactly as it is in the book, you people forgive me, because I'll try to truncate it and abbreviate it a little bit. But I had a command post that, for one reason or another, the Chinese gunner that was on the hill just across the way, a machine gun up there, used to just periodically fire bursts of machine gun bullets right over the bunker. Well, you know, the bullets are not hitting anybody, and so it was all right. But a bullet, when it goes overhead, directly, just a few inches over your head, it's a crack, a loud crack, like somebody popping a whip, and you take that up in the rarefied mountain air and in the atmosphere of one man trying to kill another man, dog eat dog, survival of the fittest. It's pretty nerve-wracking after a while. But here I am now, and I have there my first sergeant, and I have the assistant company commander and others, and so this bullet, every few minutes, this gunner would fire a burst of bullets directly over the bunker. Well, pretty soon, after some days, this began to irritate everybody. So we devised a way to get around it. We said, well, let's get a pot going here. Everybody put a buck on the table, and we'll guess how many rounds will be in the next burst. And whoever gets closest wins. So this lasted for a few days, and that worked. Well, we did a few other things that I can't write about. But then I decided, well, okay, so this noise is bugging me, and it's bugging everybody else. Let's see if we can knock it out. You know, after all, he's trying to kill me, so let me try to kill him. This is the logic of humanity. So I did everything in the world. I had sharpshooters up there. I even myself took a 50 caliber gun and loaded some special ammunition, very high powered with an extremely flat trajectory, and tried myself. But this gun was embedded in stone, way back it had been carved out of the mountain, and we couldn't get to it. I had tried to take him out with mortar fire and everything else. Well, finally, I called in an artillery strike, and I got, and I might tell you that by this time, this gun fired day and night. And my procedure was that we would normally fight over there at night, and then in the daytime I would go and troop the lines everywhere to see how everybody was, to visit the men, encourage them, or whatever would be the circumstances in warfare. I guess all of you know it's sometimes not so pleasant. And but wherever I went, I could always hear that one gun. Now, when a real gunfight would break out, no matter where I happened to be, I could hear that gun. It was not long until I could tell when they changed gunners on that gun. I could, because each one had a rhythm, a certain rhythm that he followed. Well, it started bugging me, and it got worse and worse. Finally, I called in an artillery strike. I got the artillery liaison officer, and we put an entire battalion of artillery on that top of the mountain. Almost removed the mountain. It was the most thunderous barrage that you can imagine. And I was just, you know, I served that son of a gun right. I fix him good, and I'm glad. But when it was all over with, then there was this great period of silence. And I was saying, well, I finally did it. And I no sooner said that than that gun cracked overhead again. Well, now this may sound like a small thing, but I found myself completely unable to efficiently and effectively run my company. I was making nutty decisions. I was acting irrationally. Now, you people substitute in lieu of that just some irritation in your daily affairs. Somebody that bugs you in the office, something that you don't like that the kids are doing, long hair or something that seems to bug you. Same thing, doesn't make any difference. We finally become irrational when we're bugged and can't seem to do anything about it. I remember I started a letter to Ruby, and I couldn't even write it. And I finally, and bear in mind, I was practicing metaphysician at this time, and I was doing all I could. I could not heal the situation, correct the situation. Well, I gave up. In absolute dejection, I gave up. I didn't want to go on anymore, you know. Maybe it seems nutty to tell you this now, but I just gave up. I quit. Lying there in the sack. Now, had an experience. I won't go into a lot of detail, but in effect, this experience, it was as though someone were talking to me. It really happened in a flash, but all I can do now in trying to articulate it is put it in some semblance of order. But in effect, it was as though someone said to me, well, what's bugging you? And I said, the sound is. And you know, what sound? Well, the gun. And, well, why is it bugging you? Because the bullets aren't hitting anybody. They're going overhead. And I said, well, it's the sound. The fact that I can't do anything about it, it's a very sharp and terrible and negative sound. And this thing said, well, what is a sound and where do you perceive it? Well, I said, I perceive the sound within consciousness. Well, where do you perceive any sound? Within consciousness. Which consciousness? Do you hear it in somebody else's ears or your own? I said, here, it's me, my own hearing. This is all I'm ever hearing. And it said, well, all right, now, what is the difference? It's a sound being a sound, isn't it? That is a vibration of the airwaves, and it's supposed to come and hit your ear pans and then nerve ends, and a message zooms up to some kind of a big pulp of water, and you're then supposed to hear it. Okay. Now, what's the difference between that sound and, say, the sound of your little boy? And I says, aha, one's a good sound and one's a bad sound. And then this thing went on to say, it is? Well, what's the difference between that sound and the New York Philharmonic that you love music. I should say somebody else, the Beatles or something. You love music. I love music. Well, what's the difference? Well, I said one sound's a good sound, one sound's a bad sound. And then in effect it said, well, who makes this determination? Does the sound make the determination? The sound is just being a sound. Wouldn't it be a stupid machine gun that didn't make a sound like that? It's just a sound being a sound. The bullets aren't hurting anybody. So what power does the sound have? Here you are all apart, flying apart at the seams, acting irrationally, biting everybody's head off. And had it been a situation here, it would have said, well, you're giving the kids hell or something else. Why? Who says that it's a good sound or a bad sound? Who makes this determination? And I had to admit that I did. Only me. Nobody had come in there and twisted my arm and made me call it a bad sound. I had determined, well, I guess because I just thought it's supposed to be a bad sound, or society said it was a bad sound, or maybe organized religion or somebody else said it was a bad, but somebody had convinced me and I bought it. Why did I buy it? I didn't have to buy it. Who did the buying of the idea? I said it was a bad sound. So therefore, who was the cause of my agony? Me, and nobody but me. And all of a sudden, I saw the solution to the problem. All I can tell you was that when this little point hit me, that all the tension and grief and agony, the sound suddenly had no power. It never really had any power. I did, in some kind of stupidity and ignorance, give it a power it never had. The sight we see doesn't have any power. Somebody can come in here and carry on a worse criminal act. That sight is just a sight being a sight to awareness. I didn't have to determine that the sound was bad. When I quit calling it good or bad, you know what? I can remember what happened then. I laughed and I told everybody, I said, And everybody else had gone to pot too in this case. It was just one of those funny situations. And I said, fellas, that gun is serving one very good purpose. It's proving to us that we can hear very well, that, that we can hear. But that's all. It's not doing anything to us. And the sound doesn't have the power, the authority. Well, that was the end. I can tell you this. You can carry this very simple illustration. There is no sight on this earth that is capable of making you call it bad. It's just a sight being a sight. Unless it comes up and twists your arm or jabs something in you and hurts physically. But so if you want to see quickly how many things, how much of our grief and agony is caused by our judgment, just from now on, look at every irritation, every frustration, and see who is the one who said that something is bad. And then we allow our own judgment and own determination that something is bad to bug us. I remember at one time I used to be incensed at, I don't know why, but I took a grand delight in looking at women's floppy hats. This was an era some time ago, and I used to think how absolutely ridiculous and how silly and how stupid and what a gook to walk up and down the street wearing that thing. It flops. It looks like a butterfly with wings. And I would sit in the car and watch one of these things go by, and I would spit and sputter and fume. Well, who said it was a sight, just a sight being a sight? And when I let go my anger, then it became funny, and it was something to be seen, and it was a delight and a joy. So it is that you will find. And by the way, the next time somebody is behind you on the freeway and you're driving along and minding your own business, and all of a sudden somebody on the horn, see? Watch what your reaction is. First thing is, a grand ego has been offended. Somebody says, I'm not driving good enough to suit them, and what's their big hurry? And so all that's happened was a sound has gone through the car. Just a sound.
No, it's the vibration coming from the person in the back.
Okay, there's a vibration, that's right. But that's all. The vibration didn't call itself good or bad. The vibration did not make you start screaming and cussing and sticking your head out the window or anything else. It was just a sound being a sound. And you will find, of course I'm liberalizing greatly here, but you will find that when you end a lot of these judgments, that many, many irritations fall away like mad. Yes, sir.
That God or first principle or universal mind, whatever you wish to call it, is all there is, I find very easy to accept. As a matter of fact, I can't conceive it as being otherwise. And if it is true, then he must be in all, through all, and is all. If this is the case, he must also be an intelligence and ego. Therefore, I must conclude that these are not things to be abandoned, but things that must be refined and educated, possibly.
Great. Beautiful statement. There is one ego. One ego. The divine ego. There are not a grand multiplicity of egos among which I am one and you are one and somebody else is one and one is competing with another. There is one ego. There is an intellect. And we don't throw it out the window. We come to understand what it is. Now, in the arena wherein we consider ourselves one ego among many, then we start out by saying, well, we're ignorant, we're stupid, and we've got to learn an awful lot, and so we're going to educate this ego and bring it up to a point of perfection. When we begin with the one ego, which is the only that's real, the single, if we go back to the single principle that you say you cannot accept it as any other way, we start with a perfect singleness within which there is nothing that worketh or maketh a lie. There is no imperfection in it. Then where does an ignorant ego that has to be educated come from? Outside of a game that we play if we believe we are a possessor of one. So, you're absolutely right. We come to understand what is this thing called intellect. We don't stop our educational processes, but our basis is different. We go on and read, this time not from the standpoint of one who's stupid and trying to climb up the leg of God to perceive wisdom, but this time we continue to read and study. But this time we say, aha, infinite, the one ego, infinite intelligence, wisdom itself is being who and what I am, and it is about the business of perceiving itself, a new aspect of itself, another aspect of itself. So while it appears that the same things are going on, the same studies, the same groups, the same getting together, it is from the standpoint of intelligence and wisdom that we act rather than from the standpoint of a sinning, sick, miserable mortal that denies the singleness and oneness of God, the allness and totality of perfection. So your point is beautifully taken, and I hope maybe I've cleared it up a little bit. Indeed, there is one ego. It's called, what is it? Sufi or something that speaks of the divine ego. And I know that in Christian Science there is mention of the divine ego. And many of the metaphysical concepts speak of the one ego, the only, the id, or whatever you want to call it.
This is followed by another question then.
All right.
What, if God is all there is, what is it that gets off the track and must get back and understand all these? Somebody...
Well, who says that anything is off the track when something goes awry? Who says that anything about this human experience is wrong or bad?
Well, it's not wrong or bad because I don't believe in that either. If God is all there is, then everything just is. It's not good or bad or large or small. It just is. But we keep saying that we have a wrong concept here. Who's having that wrong concept?
No one is really having the wrong concept, and you're just very beautifully perceptive to ask this question. In truth, nothing has ever gotten off the track. There has never been a misidentity. There has never been a fall from truth or a fall from reality, but there certainly does appear to have been, doesn't it? And religion at the moment is trying to convince us that there was a grand fall and the intrusion of the devil and all that kind of business. But never has this been so. All I can do is maybe use an illustration that might in some way or other, granted this will answer your question that I'm getting. But about why the appearances. If you will remember the illustration of the cicada that I've used so many times, but I love that illustration, so I'm going to pull it again. There's a bug that lives in the ground for 17 years, and it lives in a two-dimensional darkness. And down there in that two-dimensional darkness, it perhaps could evolve a society and a great language if it wanted to, if such were possible. But in any event, one day, out of a grand discontent, or because it is just in the process of being, the bug becomes dissatisfied, and suddenly things that before, for a very long time, had seemed very right, suddenly seem wrong. And it starts battling with the earth and the rocks around itself. Well, and he might at this time say, well, the rock is a hindrance or a handicap, or I don't like it, it's oppressing me, it's strictly giving me a hard time, but what's wrong with it? Nothing is bad about it. Now, he might here, as this two-dimensional bug in darkness, think that and judge many things to be bad. But the greater perspective sees that what is happening is a very natural and normal event that allows this bug suddenly to writhe and wriggle in his agony until he emerges into a new dimension. And lo and behold, he says, well, good grief, here is something that I've never seen before. Here is light and form and color. And incidentally, there aren't any words. But his words were evolved in the two-dimensional darkness, so how in the world are you going to communicate the greater dimension except by using the words of the darkness, illustrations of the darkness, parables of darkness, and using the terminology like allness or oneness or singleness. But nonetheless, there is some grand new dimension to communicate. So what is transpiring here is that awareness is, bear in mind, what is awareness again? It is the knowing of infinity, or deity's own self-perception going on. So deity is infinite, without bounds. This awareness then is a perusal of infinity. That is, it is an eternal action. It never perceives the same thing. That is, it's going on and on and on. It appears in time or in the tangible arena to be a finite perusal, an event that is transpiring in time. But this is, again, only the only way infinity can appear tangibly, as periods of time. Well, so what is going on here, right here? Without question, what's going on here is awareness perceiving new aspects of itself, overturning and letting go misconceptions. This is the turmoil that is presently going on in the world. It is inevitable that we see institutions and organizations and so forth predicated with foundations of sand. be shaken up, turned every way but loose, until such time as there is a honesty, as honesty genuinely is presented. Truth as truth really is. You bear in mind that if one believes in a two-dimensional darkness and it is part of the evolution of awareness to perceive all there is, that sooner or later it must perceive the new dimension as it emerges from this hole in the ground. And it does. So this then is and furthermore, the old two-dimensional concepts are turned upside down. Just as surely at one time as our cartographers believed that the earth was flat. All of our educational and religious institutions preach such a concept that the earth was flat. We could even prove it physically because it appeared flat and because our instruments and so forth indicated it was flat, but there was always a very slight little infinitesimal error that nobody could ever explain away, and it was that little slight infinitesimal error, the truth. And the truth is always slight and infinitesimal. It comes like the fragrance of a flower. It's very gentle. It blooms in the heart, not in the intellect. It comes forth to say, aha, everything is not just exactly as it appears. And so the question then, why does it appear that things are off the track? There's nothing off the track. And this is why we can say in all honesty that perfection really is right here at hand. This is why lights, such as the one called Jesus, and many others said perfection is right now spread over the whole face of the land, but men perceive it not.
In essence, you're saying that the ultimate reality is consciousness, period.
No. That which is being conscious.
That which is being conscious.
But you cannot separate ultimate reality, that is conscious. You can't separate mind from its function awareness. They're one. I'm not creating a dualism here, but we begin with this awareness, which is the function of mind. And I'm saying, yes, this awareness is everything that, every sight that you've ever seen has been perceived where? Have you ever seen a sight that didn't occur right here within and as this very awareness that's listening to old Bill up here? Where have you ever seen any sight? Within this awareness. One awareness, not anybody else's. This one you call I, identity. Now, have you ever heard a sound? Have you ever listened to any orchestra or listened to a pretty lady sing or a dog howl or, and I don't mean to equate the pretty lady singing with the dog howling. Have you ever seen, or where have you ever heard any sound except within one single awareness, this one? And where have you ever felt any feeling? It's always within one single awareness, this one right here, and this is the basis, incidentally, for the statement that there is one mind. And this is it. This is it. The one mind, as it functions and operates, is this very awareness that's aware right here, right now. There is not a material world that's unreal and a spiritual world that's real. There is this world right here, right now, that is all there is to the spiritual world, all there is to the material world, and it's an aspect of reality, not to be negated or forgotten or anything else, but to be seen and understood as it is.